Welcome to episode 2 of my podcast, which is now called Magic Cast, and we'll see if the name sticks or not. It might just be a flowing name, or maybe this is the name that it's going to be. So I'm calling it Magic Cast for now, because what is a podcast? Well, a podcast is literally casting magic, because everything you say is a spell. Words cast spells. So I don't really know what a pod is and whether it's worth casting or something we want to be casting, but magic cast is good and it works because the magic that I cast is for the light, and so the words that I'll share with you today or today are of and for the light and for our highest and best good. So I want to actually start with a song this time and then just get straight into it, because we were going through the Little Mermaid last time, the true tale of the Little Mermaid, so the real story, and we were going through how it pertains to spiritual enlightenment and how it's a reflection of the soul's journey. And I was talking about working with the god Neptune and how there's different gods and goddesses underneath the one main God, who is the prime source creator of all, the main bright light, love light, energy and consciousness of the cosmos. And then God fragmented himself into smaller pieces, creating demigods or like lower gods or lesser gods. I don't even want to say those words because I don't want to put those spells on them, so I cancel and delete that. However, they are just smaller fractions of God who have different personalities and different types of magic and different variety, like different flavors, if you will. So kind of in the way that the colors in the rainbow, they're all experienced differently. They have different frequencies and have different aspects to them. They all look slightly different, and yet they all come from the one white light, which is then shined into a prism and splits into the rainbow. So God does the same, and one of the gods that comes from God is Neptune. We all come from all of these gods. So if you imagine it's just like one white light, it splits off into smaller fragments of itself, which is then the other gods, the planets, the luminaries, the gods that you hear in different cultures and in astrology. And then from there, it splits off again and again and again, all the way down to our little souls, humans who are just small fragments of the one main creator source. People say we are God, and we are, but in quality, not in quantity. So we aren't actually the God. Like, we aren't God. God is a conscious awareness that exists outside of creation, outside of us. And so God is our highest light and our highest self, but we are just smaller fractions of God experiencing the cosmos and the universe. We aren't actually God. God is her own being, and we're just like God in quality, because our light is godly and we're made in the image of God and we are parts of her. However, we aren't in quantity, which means that God is the total of all of us together, and it's got its own conscious awareness. It's not just like me and you realizing we're God together. God is his own, her own being, and we can work with God, and really should work with God and ask God for assistance with all things in life and light, because that God loves us and is there for us. So I'm going to play a song first, and this one is my new song called People, and it's all about basically coming together and unifying and seeing the positives and how much we are so similar than we are different. So I'm going to play this song now and then get into it.
Join together for each other. Don't turn your backs, don't look the other way. Join together for together for the children. Don't turn your backs, don't look the other way. Join together for each other. We're rising up 'cause that's the only way.
So that was my song, people, and I was just having a little look online to try and find the PDF of the original story of the Little Mermaid. So the reason why we came onto the Little Mermaid in the last episode was that I was looking at the god Neptune and working with him with magic, and I realised or remembered that Ariel, her dad, is Neptune, or the god of the ocean, Trident, King Trident. So I wanted to have a look at the original story, and I wondered whether it was a myth because I wanted to find out more about her character. And I know that these stories have hidden meanings that are all about how to attain enlightenment and how to find your light within yourself and go back home or home to God after this plane. And God expresses himself, herself through all things creative. And so you'll hear things in music, you'll see things in art, you'll watch things in movies, and even just like people around you. It's like the whole of the universe is an expression and a creation, and you start to see these signs everywhere you look, showing you how to heal and showing you what parts of yourself need healing and showing you the way back to God and back home from this plane. And all the ascended masters who came down, like Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, Krishna, Mary, they all came down and taught this same truth, and guaranteed there is some music and art and movies that aren't expressing the highest truth. They're expressing negative things to try and make us manifest negative things for the agenda of the spiritual night. But once your eyes are open, and this is like your third eye almost, this is when people say those who have the eyes to see. What it's saying is those who have awoken consciously, spiritually, you start to see these signs and symbols in the same way that you might see angel numbers when you first start waking up. And it's like the way that the universe and your guides and God communicates with you in this plane, so that you can be aware of what track and path is the light path, and what track or path is the night path or the wrong path to be going down. So I didn't know whether Hans Christian Andersen, who actually wrote the original Little Mermaid story in the 1800s, whether he actually knew about enlightenment and was expressing these truths in his story on purpose to wake us up, subconsciously plant these seeds, or even if he had no idea and it was just God expressing himself, God's light expressing through the creation. The signs and the symbolism is there. The reason why people don't notice these things is because we have like some black magic spells on us to keep us asleep. It's like spells to make us dumb and stupid, and some people might even call it programming, and it's all basically energy or manipulation to stop us from being aware and seeing the truth, and instead we just got a dumb spell on us and we don't even notice it. In the same way that if someone is looking for like the ketchup in the cupboard, and they look in the cupboard and they can't find it, and they ask someone else to have a look, and it's sat right there at the front of the row, but the original person didn't see it. It's not like it had disappeared for them, but for some reason they didn't see it, and that's because they had a spell on them, making them unaware and not see. And the more that you find the light within yourself, the more that you start to awaken, you start to remember why we're here and the truth of reality and morality and the cosmos. You start to find that light within yourself, and it peels off these layers or this programming of this black magic spells and this bad energy that's making you unaware and stupid, and it starts to make you bright again because the light is bright. So you become bright, intelligent, sharp with it, and you start to realize and see things for really what they are. The illusion spells get cast away. And so when you have the eyes to see, you notice the messages in all things, because that's part of the spiritual awakening, is actually recognizing the mirrors and the reflections around you and how they are all working towards showing you what you're thinking about, what you're talking about, what your feelings are, like what you need to work on and things like that. So to go into the Little Mermaid, I'm just going to start reading from where we left off. And The Little Mermaid, the original story, is different to the Disney version, which is why I was like surprised by it, because The Little Mermaid in Disney, it just kind of sounds like it's a romance movie. But it's actually not about romance at all. And we were discussing in the first podcast episode that The Little Mermaid, all the sisters were really happy with the material things and living in the ocean of emotion, and basically just kind of okay with all that realm has to offer. Whereas she wanted more. She wanted to ascend out that realm, out of the ocean of emotion. She wanted to ascend to the higher plane or the higher mind, and she wanted to achieve enlightenment, which is really what the soul's journey is. It's ascending and being your highest light and continuing on that path upwards and upwards and upwards. And so that's what she desired more than anything else. But all the sisters and everyone else in that realm, they were just happy staying in that realm, and they didn't desire or strive for something more. And this is what me and you on this awakening path, this is where we differ, because we want more. We know there's more, because we can, on a soul level, remember that there's so much more than what this material plane has to offer. So she found the prince, she saw him, and she kind of fell in love, because he was a reflection to her of the sun or the soul. And it's like when you are in emotion and your soul is polarized, you're either more masculine or more feminine within. You've always got both energies, but polarized means that you're out of balance and you're living mostly in one or mostly in the other, and then the other one is weak, and you need to work on it in order to become balanced and whole as a soul. And yet so many of us, we don't realize that we have to do this. This is the spiritual work, and what we do instead is we look externally outside of ourselves for these things to make us feel whole, when actually we'll feel whole completely once we do the inner work. So she's seen him, and because she is in her emotion, which is out of balance, she is in just her feminine energy. She now has seen him, and he makes her feel whole and complete, because she's seeing externally what she's lacking internally. And she thinks that by unifying with him externally, that will make her feel complete. This is what I'm saying. It's an internal process that we've been misled and misguided to externalize from ourselves. And now we're constantly chasing material things, physical things that make us feel good, things that make us feel high, all these types of stuff, experiences, people. We're looking for them outside of ourselves to give us that rush and that kick and to feel good, when actually it's an internal thing. So she's seen him, and basically there was a shipwreck, and he got washed. He was drowning. She saved him and swum him to the shore. I don't think anyone else survived. I'm not sure, but she basically saved him. And he's basically on the shore, and he wasn't coming round, and so she gave him a kiss on the forehead. And that's where we left off. She saw dry land rise before her in high blue mountains, topped with snow as glistening white as if a flock of swans were resting there. Down by the shore were splendid green woods, and in the foreground stood a church, or perhaps a convent. She didn't know which, but anyway it was a building. Orange and lemon trees grew in its garden, and the tall palm trees grew beside the gateway. Here the sea formed a little harbour, quite calm and very deep. Fine white sand had been washed up below the cliffs. She swam there with the handsome prince and stretched him out on the sand, taking special care to pillow his head up high in the warm sunlight. The bells began to ring in the great white building and a number of young girls came out into the garden. The little mermaid swam away behind some tall rocks that stood out of the water. She covered her hair and her shoulders with foam so that no one could see her tiny face, and then she watched to see who would find the poor prince. In a little while, one of the young girls came upon him. She seemed frightened, but only for a minute, and then she called more people. The mermaid watched the prince regain consciousness and smile at everyone around him, but he did not smile at her, for he did not even know that she had saved him. She felt very unhappy, and when they led him away to the big building, she dived sadly down into the water and returned to her father's palace. She had always been quiet and wistful, and now she became so much more so. Her sisters asked her what she had seen on her first visit up to the surface, but she would not tell them a thing. Many evenings and many mornings she revisited the spot where she had left the prince. She saw the fruit in the garden ripened and harvested, and she saw the snow on the high mountain melted away, but she did not see the prince, so each time she came home sadder than she had left. It was her one consolation to sit in her little garden and throw her arms about the beautiful marble statue that looked so much like the prince. But she took no care of her flowers now. They overgrew the paths until the place was a wilderness, and their long stalks and leaves became so entangled in the branches of the tree that it cast a gloomy shade. Finally, she couldn't bear it any longer. She told her secret to one of the sisters. Immediately, all of the other sisters heard about it. No one else knew except a few more mermaids who told no one, except their most intimate friends. One of these friends knew who the prince was. She too had seen the birthday celebration on the ship. She knew where they had come from and where his kingdom was. "Come, little sister," said the other princesses. Arm in arm they rose from the water in a long row, right in front of where they knew the prince's palace stood. It was built of pale, glistening golden stone with great marble staircases, one of which led down to the sea. Magnificent gilt domes rose above the roof, and between the pillars all around the building were marble statues that looked almost lifelike. Through the clear glass of the lofty windows, one could see into the splendid halls, with their costly silk hangings and tapestries, and walls covered in paintings that were delightful to behold. In the centre of the main hall, a large fountain played its columns of spray up to the glass-domed roof through which the sun shone down on the water and upon the lovely plants that grew in the big basin. Now that she knew where he lived, many an evening and many a night she would spend there in the sea. She swam much closer to shore than any of her sisters would dare venture, and she even went far up a narrow stream under the splendid marble balcony that cast its long shadow in the water. Here she used to sit and watch the young prince when he thought himself alone at night, in the bright moonlight. On many evenings she saw him sail out in his fine boat with music playing and flags aflutter. She would peep out through the green rushes, and if the wind blew her long silver veil, anyone who saw it mistook it for a swan spreading its wings. On many nights she saw the fishermen come out to sea with their torches and heard them tell about how kind the young prince was. This made her proud to think that it was she who had saved his life when he was buffeted about, half dead among the waves. And she thought of how softly his head had rested on her breast, and how tenderly she had kissed him, though he knew nothing of all this, nor could he even dream of it. Increasingly, she grew to like the human beings, and more she longed to live among them. Their world seemed so much wider than her own, for they could skim over the sea in ships and mount up into the lofty peaks high over the clouds, and their lands stretched out in woods and fields farther than the eye could see. There was so much she wanted to know. Her sisters could not answer all her questions, so she asked her old grandmother, who knew about the upper world, which was what she said was the right name for the countries above the sea. It's interesting because this upper world in the palace, it sounds like heaven, like the Crystal Palace, and the way that it was all golden and marble and things like that. And the upper world is like heaven on earth, or being in your heavenly planes or your heavenly place, which is living from the higher mind and not in the lower animalistic egoic self. And the ocean of emotion, or the ocean, represents the ego and living in your ego. So she wants to ascend and she wants to live up in a heaven-like state instead, which is what enlightenment is. And it's interesting how she was saying that even when you ascend upwards, you can see like so much more, you can experience so much more, and you can like travel across the water, on top of the water, rather than in the ego. And it reminded me of Jesus walking on water, because Jesus was an ascended enlightened master. And it's like all metaphors to say that you can ascend the ego and you can basically explore and live in the higher realms, and you don't then get stuck in the ego. You don't descend into the ego and get drown in the ocean of emotion. You're above it. So this is what she said to her grandma. If men aren't drowned, the Little Mermaid asked, do they live on forever? Don't they die as we do down here in the sea? This is the part that made me think, what? Switcheroo? Because the original story didn't ask anything like this. There was never this dialogue of wondering about like life after death or the soul and things like that. So this is where I was really interested. So if men aren't drowned, the Little Mermaid asked, do they live on forever? Don't they die as we do down here in the sea? Yes, the old lady said, they too must die, and even their lifetimes are shorter than ours. We can live to be 300 years old, but when we perish, we turn into mere foam on the sea and haven't even a grave down here among our dear ones. We have no immortal soul, no life hereafter. We are like the green seaweed, once cut down, it never grows again. Human beings, on the contrary, have a soul which lives forever. Long after their bodies have turned to clay, it rises through the thin air up to the shining stars. Just as we rise through the water to see the lands on earth, so men rise up to beautiful places unknown, which we shall never see. Why weren't we given an immortal soul? The Little Mermaid sadly asked. I would gladly give up my 300 years if I could be a human being only for a day and later share in that heavenly realm. I just want to stop there a sec, because it's really interesting that they're saying that the mermaid doesn't have an immortal soul and yet humans do. So what I was wondering is, the mermaid, I used to think that it was just another, like an elemental being or like an interdimensional being that was just like us, just like animals, just like the dragons, just like the unicorns, just existing and living in a different dimension, but all souls and all fragments of the one source, just different expressions. And we too could be a mermaid in a different lifetime. We could incarnate into that realm, into that density, and experience that. And so the reason why I was taking this story and thinking, is there some truth to some of this, is because when you look back at stories in the past, like older ones, like past the early 1900s, so this one was written in the 1800s, there's a lot of truth back then, because that was a time of Tartaria. And Tartaria was a really advanced civilization, obviously not too long ago, where they had advanced technology. They were probably much more advanced and connected and in tune spiritually and physically as well. The lie is that we are the highest evolved we have ever been right now, and that's not true. We're actually probably the lowest and the most descended we've ever been in a state as humanity as a whole. And so when you look back at stories of Tartaria and things like that, the older stories that haven't yet been changed and manipulated to suit the new narrative, you start to see even more of the potential hidden truths. Just like there's old maps that have dragons on and like centaurs, so like half horse, half human type beings, and like giants. When you look back at the old texts, the old historical literature and maps and things like that, you start to see a complete different story to what they've been painting. So one of the things I was thinking is, I just thought mermaids were the same as us. Why do they not have souls? So I was like, this is really interesting that this story has taken a turn that way, because this is just so different to what the Disney story was. Another thing that came to me though was, obviously we know about the fall of Atlantis, and Atlantis is now supposedly under the sea, and we do wonder whether it's now the realm where mermaids live, because it's all under the sea, and it's just got that kind of vibe. Well, in Atlantis in the past, people talk about how they got so technologically advanced that they started doing weird experiments. I don't know if it's true, I can't prove it. This is what people talk about, that they started doing weird experiments with like creating genetically mutated animals and hybrids, maybe creating like half human, half animal type beings. And it was like people were taking the magic and the technology too far to a weird place that it shouldn't have gone. And supposedly that's why Atlantis ended up getting flooded, because the people were starting to go like west or south. They were starting to turn negative and use things in a negative way, getting infiltrated by negative forces. And so one of the things I wondered is, what if mermaids were made by humans, not by God, and so they actually don't have a soul, because they are just genetic mutations that humans have created, and so they don't have the soul, because you have a soul when God's created you, and God created humans, and then you have a soul. But if it's like a man-made creation, I don't believe we can gift them souls. And so I thought, could this be what it is? Or even, what if they had souls and they were people like me and you? And what if they had souls, God-given souls, and then because they started doing weird things in Atlantis, and maybe it was these exact people that were doing the weird experiments, maybe some kind of negative karma or kickback that they had because of that is that they got their soul taken from them, or their light taken from them, or their eternal life taken from them, and it was almost like a punishment of like messing around with stuff, and they ended up getting themselves into this mess. I don't believe God would ever take someone's soul from them. He probably can, probably if someone's really, really, really bad. But I think it's possible that these types of beings could just be, they were messing on themselves, they were doing stuff, and they ended up going down a timeline or reality where their light went. Similar to what people talk about with the jabs and like things that are going on at the minute in like transhumanism, merging with AI and robots and stuff. Maybe they did it in a different way, but merging with animals, and just ended up descending in consciousness to this half animal, half human that doesn't have the light of God in them anymore, or doesn't have the soul anymore. And it was like a bit like, wow, because the Little Mermaid herself, she has the desire to have her soul back. So it's like you might go down this mess, but then the generations coming after you, they have to suffer that. And so it's almost like it's so much to think about. And it also all could just be a complete metaphor for the fact that humans don't have eternal life on this plane, and that's being in your ego and in your emotion. You don't have your eternal kind of light, but once you do become enlightened on this plane, you actually do become immortal. You live forever basically, and then you choose when you want to go. This is why so many Buddhist people who become enlightened, they go into a meditation and they just pass on whenever they choose. It says in the Emerald Tablets of Thoth that you can't be killed by man. So that means that you can't die by the hands of man when you're enlightened. You have eternal life on this plane. And it could be that This is all just a metaphor for the hero's journey and the soul's journey to enlightenment. And her being the mermaid is a representation of being in your animalistic self and in your ego. And then when you ascend up, you become the human or the enlightened one in God's image, where you do then have immortality on this plane. So I just want to say as well, before we get back into the dialogue between the grandmother and the Little Mermaid, thank you so much to your comments on the last episode, and please share again with what your thoughts are. There's so much to unpack with all of this, and I love to find out your perspective as well, because I learned so much from you guys too. So one of my friends, Mem, he actually commented on the YouTube video, and he actually mentioned as well, which was really interesting. We were talking about the number 6 and 12, and how I was saying that it's a reflection of the zodiac, and basically it's a reflection of how many of the zodiac's energies you have integrated to become the whole zodiac, the whole holy person. This is what Jesus Christ was. He was the 13th, and there was 12 disciples under him. That's the 12 signs of the zodiac, and he was the 13th. And so to become whole, a holy person and a whole soul, you integrate the energies of them all, and you ascend and become that 13th. You're no longer governed by the 12, and you're no longer a piece of the 12. You are then the 13th, the ascended one, the enlightened one, and the holy one. The word Christ is actually just a title that means the anointed one. Buddha is the same. These are just titles for those who attained enlightenment. So I was talking about becoming a whole, and whether this 6 and the 12 was a representation of whether they are not a holy soul or whether they were a complete soul. And just to go back on the word whole versus being a piece of the whole, this is why I never say the word peace, because peace is to be a piece. And so it's not actually about being like together and like oneness and unity. It's about division. It's a small section, and so you don't go peace. Yeah, we don't want to be separate, we want to be together, like that. And if you're watching on the YouTube or the Rumble, you'll see them doing a mudra, and if you look at photos, statues or paintings of Jesus Christ, he always holds that mudra. And that's probably the true peace sign. That peace sign is the two fingers separate. So that's divided. What you want to be doing is the fingers together. And that actually, instead of being, oh, peace, it could be like, oh, wholeness, togetherness kind of thing. People also say there's Baphomet does that as well. And Baphomet is like kind of a reflection of the devil. However, the devil takes that which is good and that which is of the light and inverts it and flips it and tries to put shade on it and make it into the night. So you'll see things like the cross, but they've inverted it, so they flip it upside down. Or you'll see the pentagram, but they've inverted it and they've flipped it upside down. Or you'll see them doing mudras that are actually mudras of the light, and yet they try and put you off it. Even the number 666 actually is the number of Jesus Christ, and they try and scare you from that as well. And I've even been around the world. I've been around the UK and I've gone to different megaliths, and there's been certain ones that are called like the devil's. There were certain ones called like the Devil's Den, and they've named them these names so that you'd be too scared to go to them, because those ones are the ones that had strong energy and a strong charge. And so they basically, the devil can't create anything himself, but what he does is he takes that which is of the light and tries to flip it and invert it and pervert it and destroy it, so that people no follow it anymore, they no light it anymore, and he basically tries to ruin the light and turn it into the night. So something really interesting that Mem had noticed was that the 6 and the 12, if you look at astrology and the zodiac, that's actually the 6th house and the 12th house, which are governed by 6 being Virgo and 12 being Pisces. So Virgo is the woman and Pisces is the fish, which is literally the Little Mermaid. She's half fish, half woman. So the 6 and the 12 could have represented literally the reflection of the Little Mermaid being half of Virgo and half of Pisces, and a bit of a metaphor for that. The other thing is, when this book was written in the 1800s, we were in the age of Virgo and Pisces. So the book was written to reflect the energies of the time, basically, and what was going on at the time, the energies of Virgo and Pisces. And so the character, the Little Mermaid, could have been reflecting literally the energies at play. To go back to the story, she said she would gladly give up through 300 years of life to get an immortal soul. And this is like part of the ego death on the spiritual experience. You have to be willing and ready to let go of everything on this plane. Everything. That's like people, places, things, anything you could have on this plane. You need to be willing to let go of it all and die a spiritual death, which is dying like the ego death, because it's your emotional attachments to things on this plane that hold you back in life. And so you need to be ready and willing to let go of it all. And she says she's willing to even give up her whole life just for one day as a human, just to gain her eternal immortal soul. And I think that part of the path for some people as well, it certainly is for me, is that is all that I am here to achieve. And I absolutely, yes, that this is my last lifetime here, unless I choose to come back. And I believe that I chose to come back here to begin with on this life. But I will put my enlightenment and my ascension and my finding the light and healing and my spiritual work before anything. It's my main thing I would ever focus on before anything. And you might find the same with you, that that is all your soul desires, is to be its highest and best self. There's nothing on this plane that can tempt you and keep you here. And sometimes it's the temptations of this plane that trick people into getting reincarnated back here again and again and again, because once they pass on, they get offered these things, or maybe just their general emotional attachment. It's like an energetic cord. It literally drags them and pulls them back to whatever they were attached to on this plane. This is why I let it go, get rid of it all, and do it now, because the earth plane it's not the one. Like, you want to go back up to heaven, because in heaven it's bliss. There's no pain, no suffering, no death, no negativity. It's bliss. You can enjoy all the things you want. That is true light and life, and it's the best. Down here it's like false tricks of heaven. So it's like junk food, or like sex, or gambling, or like adrenaline rushes and people and emotions, and it makes you think that it feels good, certain things, but then you have the opposite where it feels really bad, and there's pain and there's suffering. And like whatever joys and treats you can have on this plane is nothing compared to the treats you get in heaven, because if it is that you just love like burgers so much, you can have them in heaven, and no one had to die for it, and it doesn't matter whether it's healthy or not, because you're just a light being in a light body, and it doesn't affect your health negatively, so you don't have the side effects. Whereas this plane, it's like all the good comes with like a side effect of bad. So we don't want to get stuck here. And some people say, I'm happy here, I'm fine here, it's fine, like it's not that bad. You've obviously not lived a life of suffering then. And you might do that eventually if you continue to stay here again and again. You're also just feeding the evil ones down here, because your energy is just food for the spiritual night, and God wants you home. Heaven's so much better. Just go. Just trust me on this one. You don't want to get stuck down here, because it is quite hard to get back up if you don't know how. And at the minute, the way that the astrological changes are happening, now is prime time to do the work and to go back up and ascend up the planes, because the cosmos is aligning and supporting just that, because we're going into the new age of Aquarius, which is going to be a golden age, which is a mass enlightenment, a mass awakening, a mass ascension for all. So it's no longer just select groups of people who go off into the mountains and they get taught by a Buddha and they find enlightenment and they leave on their own. Because sometimes it's in the past, like you'll hear stories of like Hopi tribes or random tribes just disappearing because they've all attained enlightenment together, and they've gone and ascended up to the higher planes. And so people have done it individually in small collectives. However, the world around them has been like negative and shit, and it's been harder. But what's happening is right now the cosmos and everything's aligning where it's attainable and achievable for everyone, not just the small groups anymore. So this is going to be the easiest opportunity to ride that wave and ascend out of here. And people might have been stuck here for hundreds of thousands of years, lifetime after lifetime, never being able to go back to a place that feels good and that never has suffering. So this is your opportunity, and this lifetime is the one to take it. Any work you do in any lifetime, though, it will always build towards your soul's progress. So even if you don't have loads of opportunities in this lifetime, do what you can, because it is all going to build towards in the next lifetime. You might be able to do it then. But this is the time right now in the golden age of Aquarius for the next up to like 12,000 years to ride that wave before it starts to descend and the consciousness of humanity starts to descend again. So let's go back to the grandmother's conversation. So she said, the Little Mermaid said she'd happily just give it all up to become enlightened and to basically be able to go and enjoy heaven and be in like a heaven-like state. The grandma says, "You must not think about that," said the old lady. "We fare much more happily and are much better off than the folk up there." And then the Little Mermaid says, "Then I must also die and float as foam upon the sea, not hearing the music of the waves and seeing neither the beautiful flowers nor the red sun. Can't I do anything at all to win an immortal soul?" "No," her grandmother answered, "not unless a human being loved you so much that you meant more to him than his mother and father. If his every thought and his whole heart cleaved to you so that he would let a priest join his right hand to yours and would promise to be faithful here and throughout all of eternity, then his soul would dwell in your body and you would share in the happiness of mankind. He would give you a soul and yet keep his own, but that can never come to pass. The very thing that is your greatest beauty here in the sea, your fishtail, would be considered ugly on land. They have such a poor taste that to be thought beautiful there, you have to have two awkward props, which they call legs." Now, just to note as well, it's interesting how she basically said that the human being has to love her enough basically for his soul to integrate into her so she can have a soul as well. And this is, if it is a reflection and all a metaphor, this is a perfect way to explain enlightenment, because enlightenment is when you get the masculine and feminine aspects of your soul together, the two kind of halves, the two energies, and you unify them as one. And that's what true marriage is. So they call it marriage. It's a spiritual marriage. And this is actually what the true marriage was in like in the Bible and things like that. When people taught about marriage, it was actually about the marriage within. And so it was about you unifying your own soul and marrying the masculine and feminine aspects of yourself within. So what the grandma's saying is, if you do the internal marriage, then you'll become an enlightened master and have an eternal soul or an eternal life on this plane. And so that is the reflection of enlightenment completely. However, if it is more like literal than that, what she's saying is that a human has to love her in order for her to get a soul. Now, surely she could ask God for a soul, but the grandma and no one really down there talks about God. And so it makes me wonder, like when you're in the ego, or if they really are descended beings in the lower realm, the denser realm of the ocean of emotion, maybe they just don't have a connection to God anymore. Maybe they don't know him or don't want to know him, or no one's taught them about him. So instead, she says that a human being has to love her. Now, what I found interesting as well is I was looking at the consciousness of animals, and I was looking at how when you've got an animal that lives with you or works closely with a human, there's animals obviously that live in the wild, and then there's ones that we kind of look after. And I don't really like domestication of animals or kind of buying into the pet trade. I'd be happy for adopting and helping and saving animals and looking after those, even the ones in the wild. Why not put food out for them? Why not build them shelters around the land that they can use and enjoy? We can look after the animals and be guardians of them in that sense. But I don't really agree with kind of buying into the pet trade and breeding puppies and kittens and taking them away from their mums, and the mums are overbred. And I believe, and I think I'm right, that animals love their families, like the mothers love their babies, the babies love their mums. They've got the same emotional they have the same emotional bodies that we do. And so taking babies away from mothers, it's painful emotionally to them, it's scarring, it's not fair. So going in on the animal thing. However, what I did learn is I was thinking about how animals help humans, because I used to have a cat, and to be fair, she was bought from the pet industry. We bought her as a kitten, and I wouldn't do it again now that I know what I know. But she was my best friend, and she, I believe, was a soul guide. She was like part of my soul tribe, or maybe a part of me, or part of my higher self, and an angel that came down to be with me through those times in life, to be a guardian angel with me on the earth. And she helped me through so much. We were best friends. I loved her deeply. She loved me deeply, and we had the strongest connection I think I've ever had on this plane. So animals are here to assist, and we do, I believe, have soul contracts, or kind of like we have kind of relationships with them outside of this plane. And so there's that as well. What I learned though is that when animals are living with humans, or when they work for us or with us, so not like they're a slave to us, but say you've got a service dog and it's got a purpose in life and it feels good doing that purpose. There's some that don't enjoy it and there's some that do. The ones that do are the ones that we live with, and they kind of see us, and like we take them out for a walk. Say if you've got a dog, take it out for a walk and they watch us and they want to be like us, so they desire to be a human, and we impress our consciousness on them. The more time that they spend with us and in our energy, they become more like us. We imbue them with our consciousness and our awareness and our energy, and they become smart and intelligent like us. And so their soul, after they pass on in that life, their soul will emotionally desire to be a human, because it wants the experience of being able to go out whenever it wants, or to be able to choose what food it wants, and to laugh and to watch things and experience so much more than what animals experience. And so they desire to have that. And so because we live closely to them, and our energy integrates with them, and our consciousness rubs off on them, we kind of gift them the awareness and desire to be more and to ascend as a soul, to become a human, and then to have the opportunity to become enlightened, to ascend up as an angel and keep going up in the higher planes. And so it made me wonder, is it going back to how it could be that they are literal like half animal hybrids? Is it that they were man-made, they don't have souls, but by kind of integrating or being with humans, they can integrate our energy and become that in the next life or something? So after the grandma said you need legs to go up into the human realm, the little mermaid sighed and looked unhappily at her fishtail. "Come, let us be gay," the old lady said. "Let us leap and bound throughout the 300 years that we have to live. Surely that is time and to spare, and afterwards we shall be glad enough to rest in our graves. We are holding a court ball this evening." This was a much more glorious affair than is ever to be seen on earth. The walls and the ceiling of the great ballroom were made of massive but transparent glass. Many hundreds of rose-red and grass-green shells stood on each side in rows, with the blue flames that burned in each shell illuminating the whole room and shining through the walls so clearly that it was quite bright in the sea outside. You could see the countless fish, great and small, swimming towards the glass walls. On some of them the scales gleamed purplish red, while others were silver and gold. Across the floor of the hall ran a wide stream of water, and upon this the mermaids and mermen danced to their own entrancing songs. Such beautiful voices are not to be heard among the people who live on land. The mermaid sang more sweetly than anyone else, and everyone applauded her. For a moment her heart was happy because she knew she had the loveliest voice of all, in the sea or on land. But her thoughts soon strayed up to the world above. She could not forget the charming prince, nor her sorrow that she did not have an immortal soul like his. Therefore she stole out of her father's palace, and whilst everything there was song and gladness, she sat sadly in her own little garden. What's interesting as well is actually the garden can be a reflection of the mind, and you can plant seeds in your garden and they can become flowers or they can become weeds or overgrown things. And this can be like overthinking. Your garden becomes messy and all over the place and you can't kind of see things clearly and neatly, or your garden can be beautiful. Well, her garden, or in her mind, she was always thinking about more than just the material. She grew flowers that were a reflection of the sun, is what we learn in the first episode. And she had the marble statue that represented the sun god. And so in her mind, in her garden, when she would sit and contemplate in her garden or in her mind, all that she ever desired or wanted was this soul, the soul being the sun, because the sun is the soul of the cosmos and it's a macrocosm reflection of the microcosm, which is our internal soul. Then she heard a bulge call through the water and she thought, that must mean he is sailing up there, he whom I love more than my father or mother, he of whom I am always thinking and in whose hands I would so willingly trust my lifelong happiness. I dare do anything to win him and gain an immortal soul. While my sisters are dancing here in my father's palace, I shall visit the sea witch, of whom I have always been so afraid. Perhaps she will be able to advise me and help me. The little mermaid set out from her garden towards the whirlpools that raged in front of the witch's dwelling. She had never gone that way before. No flowers grew there, nor any seaweed. Bare and grey the sands extended to the whirlpools, where like roaring millweeds the waters whirled and snatched everything within their reach down to the bottom of the sea. Between these tumultuous whirlpools, she had to thread her way to reach the witch's waters, and then for a long stretch the only trail lay through a hot, seething mere, which the witch called her peat marsh. Beyond it, her house lay in the middle of a weird forest, where all the trees and shrubs were polyps, half animal and half plant. They looked like 100-headed snakes growing out of the soil. All their branches were long, slimy arms with fingers like wriggling worms. They squirmed joint by joint from their roots to their outermost tentacles, and whatever they could lay hold of, they twined around and never let go. The little mermaid was terrified and stopped at the edge of the forest. Her heart thumped with fear and she nearly turned back, but then she remembered the prince and the souls that men have, and she summoned her courage. She bound her long flowing locks closely about her head so that the polyps could not catch hold of them, folded her arms across her breast, and darted through the water like a fish in among the slimy polyps that stretched out their writhing arms and fingers to seize her. She saw that every one of them had held something that it had caught with its hundreds of little tentacles, and to which it clung as with strong hoops of steel. The white bones of men who had perished at sea and sunk to these depths could be seen in the polyps' arms. Ships' rudders and seamen's chests and the skeletons of land animals had also fallen into their clutches, but the most ghastly sight of all was a little mermaid whom they had caught and strangled. Now, that's deep. That is deep for a Disney movie. They obviously didn't have strangled Little Mermaid in there. But what's interesting is this could be a reflection of going to the depths of your darkest fears and the depths of your kind of shadows in order to do the shadow work and the healing in order to find your immortal soul and to find the light within yourself. So it could again be a metaphor of having to go down deep and dig into all that horrible, the subconscious mind and the subconscious, and see all those areas and aspects of yourself that need healing, and it's scary and it's dirty and it's painful and there's death down there. And the sea witch half reminded me of the god Hades or Pluto, who represents the underworld, and going down into the underworld in order to kind of come back up and be rebirthed into the light. However, also on a physical level, it could be that she's actually gone and turned to the devil and done a deal with the devil, or going to do a deal with the devil, rather than turning to God and asking God for help. So we will find out in the next episode what she does, whether it's the same as the Little Mermaid movie or whether she makes a different decision, and whether she gets her eternal soul. So that's going to be the end of this episode. Thank you so much for listening, for watching. I have visuals of these on my YouTube and my Rumble. And just a last note, I'll try and talk about it more in the next episode. I'll try and remember. I'm wearing all white today. Today is Wednesday, which is a Mercury ray. I was talking about how there's different gods and different energies that govern the different rays, and there's also a colour that corresponds with each ray. So today on Mercury ray, it is the colour white. So if you wear white on Wednesday, it fills you with the light of that ray. It gives you so much strength, and it helps with things that are mercurial in nature. So if you look at what the planet Mercury represents, communication, like writing things, radio, speaking and things like that, recording, magic cast, it's a great ray to do that on. So if you wear the colour that corresponds to the correct ray, you'll find yourself filled with strength and filled with the energy that resonates with that ray to fulfill the tasks that resonate with that ray. So you can almost split up your septenary each day, or each ray, split it up to do the tasks that are governed by the energy of that ray, so that you have a more successful ray, because all the energies of that ray and of the cosmos are flowing and charging you with that energy. So as an example, on Friday, Venus ray, that's governed by Venus, it's also the colour blue. Venus is all about creativity, art, music, beauty. And so if you are doing like a beauty routine, if you're going to dye your hair, I don't like the word dye your hair, but if you're going to colour your hair, and then do it on a Venus ray, because the energy of beauty is resonate with that ray. And so if you wear blue and fill yourself with that energy even more, and you just do that beauty routine on that ray, it'll be even more beautiful and powerful, because it's all aligned and flowing and synchronized. So I wanted to just share that. And in the next episode, I'll share which ray is which colour and which god, and I'll go into that in more detail. Anyway, thank you so much. Please let me know what you thought about this, and I will light you soon. Ta-ra!